The sky above the alien world shimmered in colors that no human eye had ever seen before. Clouds twisted in slow spirals of violet and green, while twin suns cast long shadows over the metallic city below. Towers shaped like spears reached toward the heavens, and everywhere the sound of machinery and alien voices filled the air. It was a place where humans were guests, not rulers, and their presence was often questioned. Among the few humans allowed to walk these strange streets was Daniel, a quiet engineer from Earth. He was not a soldier, not a politician, and not a warrior. He had been sent as part of a small peace mission, meant to show cooperation between humans and the alien empire. But Daniel often felt invisible. He did not have the strength of the soldiers or the authority of the ambassadors. He was only an engineer, carrying tools and knowledge that most aliens thought of as primitive compared to their advanced science. Still, Daniel had a gift. He was a problem solver. Back on Earth, he had grown up fixing broken machines in his father's small workshop. He learned not just how to repair, but how to listen to the quiet language of gears, wires, and circuits. To him, machines were like puzzles waiting to be solved, and no puzzle was too strange. That gift would soon place him in a moment he never expected. The problem began with the alien queen's armor. Her armor was no ordinary suit. It was a living machine, made from metals that grew like vines and crystals that pulsed with light. It was both a weapon and a crown, a symbol of her authority. With it, she could walk through battle unharmed, command her armies, and remind her people of her strength. But something had gone wrong. The armor had stopped working properly. It started with small glitches, lights flickering, panels refusing to respond, and strange energy leaks. At first, her own engineers brushed it aside, confident they could fix it. But days passed, and nothing improved. They tried replacing the energy cores, rewiring the crystal nodes, even chanting the ancient codes that were supposed to awaken the armor's spirit. Nothing worked. The queen grew restless, and whispers spread through the city. Some claimed it was sabotage. Others feared it was a curse. The longer the armor remained broken, the weaker the queen's image appeared. On the morning of the council meeting, her frustration boiled over. She stood in the grand hall, surrounded by her advisors, and soldiers demanding answers. Dozens of alien engineers bowed before her, each admitting failure. They could not understand why the armor rejected their repairs. The silence in the hall grew heavy. Leaders from other worlds, visiting for the council, exchanged glances. Some smirked, secretly pleased to see the proud queen struggling. Her enemies sensed weakness, and that weakness could invite danger. Daniel was standing at the edge of the room, unnoticed as usual. He had been brought there only as part of the human delegation, to observe and assist if needed. His heart pounded as he watched the scene unfold. The armor stood in the center of the hall, towering and silent, its once bright core now dull. Every alien engineer had tried and failed. For a moment, Daniel hesitated. What could a human possibly offer in this place of advanced technology and ancient knowledge? Yet something stirred inside him. He saw not a cursed relic, but a machine. Complicated, yes, but still a machine. Taking a deep breath, Daniel stepped forward. His voice was soft, almost lost in the vast hall. Maybe I could try. The words echoed and heads turned sharply. Murmurs spread through the crowd. A human? The queen's golden eyes narrowed as she looked down at him. She had hardly noticed him before. You? She said, her tone sharp. You think you can do what my best engineers cannot? Daniel's face grew warm under her gaze, but he did not back down. I don't know if I can, but I can try. Sometimes a fresh set of eyes sees what others miss. The council erupted in laughter. Several alien lords shook their heads, mocking the idea that a human of all creatures could solve what their experts had failed to do. Yet the queen did not laugh. Her pride fought against her desperation. She had nothing to lose by letting him attempt it. If he failed, she could easily dismiss him as foolish. If he succeeded, well, she doubted that was possible. Very well, she said at last, her voice echoing like a command. Step forward, human. Show us your miracle if you can. The hall grew silent as Daniel approached the armor. The closer he came, the more he felt its presence. The suit was massive, taller than he was, covered in plates that shimmered like liquid metal. Strange symbols glowed faintly across its surface like veins carrying energy. He laid a hand gently against the cold metal. To him, it was not mystical. It was a system. And systems, no matter how complex, could be understood. He asked for tools. At first, the alien scoffed, but the Queen raised her hand, silencing them. A small set of instruments was brought. Daniel knelt before the armor, listening to the faint hum inside like a heartbeat out of rhythm. He studied the joints, the energy core, the connection points where crystal met metal. Slowly, piece by piece, he began to understand. Hours passed. The crowd grew restless. Some rolled their eyes and whispered about wasted time. But the Queen's gaze never left Daniel. She watched the way he worked, careful and patient, as if speaking to the armor without words. He adjusted connections, rerouted wires, polished surfaces that had been neglected. He muttered to himself quietly, thinking aloud, "It's not broken. It's misaligned. The energy isn't flowing evenly." Finally, he reached into the heart of the armor, where the glowing crystal sat dark. With a steady hand, he adjusted, a tiny conductor no one else had touched. Then, holding his breath, he reconnected the power line. A spark leapt. The crystal flickered, then glowed. The armor shuddered as if awakening from a long sleep. Lights spread across its body. Systems, humming to life. The once dead suit now stood tall, gleaming with strength. Gasps filled the hall. The alien engineers stared in disbelief. The Queen's eyes widened, her lips parting ever so slightly. For the first time, the armor lived again. Daniel stood, wiping sweat from his brow. He said nothing, only stepped back respectfully. The Queen took a slow step toward the armor, her hand brushing across its restored surface. Silence filled the hall as she looked back at him, her expression unreadable. In that moment, Daniel was no longer invisible. The hall remained quiet long after the armor came back to life. The alien Queen stood before it, her golden eyes studying every glowing line on its surface. The crowd still whispered, unable to believe what they had seen. A human, someone they thought of as inexperienced and small compared to their grand empire, had done what their brightest engineers could not. Daniel felt the weight of their stares pressing on him. Part of him wanted to step back into the shadows where he had always stayed, but another part told him to stand tall. He had not come here to boast or challenge their pride. He had only done what he always did, fix what was broken. But here, that simple act seemed like something greater. The Queen turned toward him slowly. Her presence was heavy, as if the very air bent around her. She walked closer, her armored steps echoing in the vast chamber. Daniel's throat tightened. He had seen her many times before, standing on high platforms, giving orders with a voice that could command armies. But now she was only a few steps away, looking directly into his eyes. "You worked on my armor," she said, her voice calm but sharp like the edge of a blade. "Why did you touch something sacred to my people?" Daniel bowed his head slightly, his voice steady but soft. "Because it needed fixing. I did not see it as sacred or cursed. I saw it as a machine, one that was built to protect you, and machines deserve to work as they should." Some of the alien council members gasped at his words as if he had spoken too boldly, but the Queen did not strike him down or dismiss him. Instead, she tilted her head, as though curious. "And you believe you understand it better than those who created it?" Daniel shook his head. "Not better, but differently. I learned on Earth that sometimes we stop seeing the truth of a thing when we think we already know it completely. Your people see this armor as tradition, as a symbol. I see it as wires, crystals, energy, and design, that is all." For a moment, the Queen's sharp expression softened. Then she straightened, turning to the council. "Leave us," she commanded. Her voice echoed, and though some hesitated, none dared to defy her. One by one, the chamber emptied until only a few guards remained at a respectful distance. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. Alone with the Queen? That was something he had never imagined. She studied him closely, her gaze almost piercing. "You are different from the others," she said. "Most humans who come here bring weapons or words meant to sway us. You brought only tools. Why?" Daniel smiled faintly, though nervously. "Because tools can build, tools can fix, weapons only destroy. And words don't always mean what they should. But when I repair something, it speaks for itself." The Queen's eyes lingered on him. She had met countless warriors, diplomats, and rulers. But this human did not speak like them. He did not try to prove himself with power or clever phrases. He simply stood there, honest and unshaken. Still, trust was not so easily given. "Do you know what it means to touch my armor?" she asked. "To my people, it is not only protection. It is part of me. If you had failed, if you had damaged it further, you would not be standing here now." Daniel nodded, meeting her gaze. "I knew the risk, but I also knew that if no one tried, it would remain broken. Sometimes trying is the only choice." Silence stretched between them. Then slowly the Queen walked toward the armor again. She placed her hand on the chest plate, feeling the steady hum of its restored power. The glow reflected in her eyes. "You succeeded," she said softly, almost to herself. Then louder, she added, "Perhaps your way of seeing the world is not as weak as I believed." Her guards shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to react to such words. For a queen who was known for her pride, even this small admission was extraordinary. That night, Daniel was invited to the Queen's private workshop, a place where few outsiders had ever stepped. It was not filled with golden decorations or shining thrones, but with half-finished machines, broken weapons, and designs that stretched across the walls. The Queen herself showed him pieces of armor, tools, and strange devices that had puzzled her own people for years. She watched as Daniel moved from one item to another, studying them with quiet focus. He touched each piece with care, not as though it were sacred, but as though it were alive. He asked questions no one else had thought to ask. What happens when the energy flows backward through this channel? Why does this piece have two connectors when one would be enough? Did the builders leave space for movement here, or is it locked in place? The Queen found herself answering him, explaining things she had never spoken about even to her closest advisors. His questions were not challenges, but invitations to think differently. She began to realize that this human did not see her as a queen first and a person second. He saw her armor and her machines as puzzles, and by solving them, he somehow saw her too. For the first time in a long while, she felt listened to. Not for her title, not for her power, but for the challenges she faced. Still, the bond between them was fragile. Daniel was aware that at any moment her pride could rise again and he would be sent away. But he continued to speak honestly. "On Earth," he said quietly, as he adjusted a loose connector on a smaller piece of armor, "we don't have technology like yours, but we make do with what we have. That taught us creativity. It taught us patience. I think that's why I could help today." The Queen studied him in silence. Finally, she said, "Perhaps what is simple to you is what my people have forgotten." The night ended with a strange kind of peace between them. No promises, no grand declarations, but a spark of understanding. Daniel was escorted back to his quarters, and as he walked the silent halls of the alien city, he thought about the Queen's gaze. It had not been the gaze of someone looking at a subject or an outsider. It had been the gaze of someone who, for the first time, had seen something unexpected and wanted to see more. That fragile trust built in a single day would soon grow into something that neither of them had planned for. The council chamber was filled with restless voices the next day. Leaders from different worlds had gathered again, some draped in long robes, others in heavy armor, each representing their people. They had come to discuss alliances, disputes, and plans for the future. Yet none of that mattered as much as the question that lingered in the air: the Queen's armor. Everyone had heard whispers of what happened, but now they wanted to see and hear the truth for themselves. The queen entered. With her usual commanding presence, she wore her restored armor, every line shining with power, every crystal glowing steadily. The faint hum of energy filled the room, reminding all of them of her strength. The crowd fell silent as she walked to the center of the chamber. Her steps were calm but firm, and her golden eyes swept over the leaders who had doubted her. Daniel stood among the human delegation at the edge of the hall. His heart raced as he looked at the queen. To him, she looked untouchable, as though the armor had not only been repaired but reborn. Yet he knew the truth. The glow, the steady rhythm of its systems, the smooth alignment of its parts, all of it was there because of the adjustments he had made with his own hands. Still he kept his place, humble and quiet, unsure of what the queen would say. The council leader, an elder with silver skin and long horns, raised his voice. "Your Majesty, we must ask, how has the sacred armor been restored? Our people need to know. Was it your engineers who discovered the flaw? Or perhaps divine blessing has returned to you?" The queen's gaze held steady. For a moment she said nothing, letting the silence grow heavier. The room leaned forward, waiting. Then, with a voice that carried like thunder yet remained calm, she said, "Only the human engineer fixed this armor." The word struck the chamber like a storm. Shocked murmurs rose instantly. Some laughed in disbelief, others frowned, offended by the idea. A few even shouted, demanding clarification. The idea that one human, small, inexperienced compared to their own, had succeeded where dozens of alien engineers had failed was almost too much to accept. Daniel felt his chest tighten as every head turned toward him. Whispers ran through the hall. A human? Impossible. How could he touch something sacred? What does this mean for us? The air seemed to vibrate with disbelief and unease, but the queen was not finished. She raised her hand, and the chamber fell silent again. Slowly she turned her head until her golden eyes locked onto Daniel. Her gaze did not move quickly. It lingered, traveling over the faces of the crowd before fixing directly on him. The hall, already quiet, seemed to grow stiller. The look was not filled with suspicion or anger. It was something deeper, something unreadable. Daniel swallowed hard. He felt exposed, standing there under the weight of so many stares and the queen's piercing attention. He had never wanted recognition. He had only wanted to help. Yet now he was the center of the most powerful gathering in the galaxy. One of the alien lords stood, his voice sharp. "Your Majesty, surely you do not mean this. Are you saying that your own engineers, trained for generations, could not succeed, but a human did?" The queen did not break her gaze from Daniel. "That is exactly what I am saying." Her tone left no room for argument. Gasps spread across the chamber again. Some looked outraged, others thoughtful. A few glanced at Daniel with curiosity instead of disdain. He shifted nervously, unsure if he should bow, speak, or simply remain silent. The queen finally turned back to the council. "Do not mistake me. This does not diminish the strength of my people, but it is the truth. Where knowledge failed, persistence succeeded. Where pride blinded, humility saw clearly. The armor lives again because of him." Her words carried a strange weight. For a queen known for her pride and power to speak openly in favor of a human was unheard of. Even Daniel could barely believe what he was hearing. After the meeting ended, the hall emptied slowly. Many leaders walked away whispering, still shaking their heads, while others gave Daniel curious glances. Some even looked at him with suspicion, as though they now feared what he might represent. But Daniel only felt the queen's gaze burning in his memory. That single moment when she had looked at him, in front of everyone, would not leave his mind. Later, when they returned to the quieter halls of the palace, Daniel found himself walking behind the queen. She moved with steady steps, her armor glowing softly in the dim corridors. He hesitated but finally spoke, his voice low. Why did you say that in front of them? The queen did not stop walking, but her voice reached him clearly. Because it was the truth. But you didn't have to, Daniel said. You could have taken the credit or said nothing. No one would have questioned you. She stopped then and turned toward him. Her golden eyes were steady, unblinking. You think I would lie to protect pride? A queen who hides the truth loses more than respect. She loses herself. You fixed my armor, human. I will not erase that. Daniel was stunned. He had expected suspicion, perhaps even dismissal. But instead he found honesty, even honor in her words. He nodded slowly. Thank you. For a brief moment, the queen's expression softened, just enough for Daniel to see it. Then she turned and continued walking. Do not thank me yet, she said. Your name is now on the lips of many who would rather not see a human honored. Some will watch you. Some will test you. You must be ready. Her warning sent a shiver through him, but he understood. Recognition, he realized, was not a gift. It was a responsibility. And now he carried it, whether he wanted to or not. That night, Daniel could not sleep. He lay in his quarters staring at the alien patterns carved into the ceiling, thinking of the queen's words, of the way she had looked at him, and of the silence that had fallen over the chamber when she spoke. Something had shifted that day. He had come to this world as a forgotten engineer, unnoticed and unimportant. Now he was something else, someone who mattered, not just to her armor but perhaps to her people and to her. It was a thought both heavy and hopeful. The days following the council meeting changed everything for Daniel. Before he had walked the alien city unnoticed, another face among the human delegation. Now, everywhere he went, eyes followed him. Some were curious, some doubtful, and a few even hostile. He heard whispers as he passed. That's the human engineer. He touched the queen's armor. What makes him so special? Daniel tried to ignore the attention, but it weighed on him. He was not used to being the center of anything. He preferred quiet corners, working with tools, listening to the language of machines. But now, his work had pulled him into the center of politics, power, and suspicion. The queen, however, acted as though nothing had changed. She carried herself with the same calm pride, giving orders, attending meetings, and speaking with the authority that had always defined her. Yet Daniel noticed something different. More often than before, she called on him. Not for ceremony, but for his thoughts. One evening, she summoned him to walk beside her through the palace gardens. The gardens stretched wide, filled with glowing plants that shimmered under the twin suns. Strange birds with crystal feathers sang from high branches, and the air smelled of spices and iron. The queen walked slowly, her armor gleaming softly in the fading light. Daniel kept pace, though his steps were uncertain. Tell me, she said without looking at him, why do you think you succeeded where my people failed? Daniel hesitated, searching for the right words. Maybe because I don't see things the way they do. I didn't grow up with your traditions, your beliefs about what the armor means. To me, it wasn't sacred, it was a machine. And machines, they don't care about pride or history, they just need to work. I looked at it with fresh eyes, and that made the difference. The queen was silent for a long time, listening to the distant hum of insects in the garden. Finally, she said, perhaps you are right. Pride can blind even the wisest. Daniel glanced at her. And what about you? Were you proud too? She stopped walking and turned her golden eyes on him. For a moment, Daniel worried he had spoken too boldly, but instead of anger, he saw thoughtfulness. Yes, she admitted quietly. I have been proud all my life. A queen cannot afford weakness, but perhaps pride can take many forms. To admit truth before the council, that was another kind of pride. Daniel nodded slowly, impressed by her honesty. He realized that behind the armor and the title, she was still someone who carried weight, expectations, responsibilities, doubts. For the first time, he felt not just like an observer of her power, but someone who understood a piece of her struggle. Their walks became frequent after that. Sometimes they discussed machines and designs, with Daniel explaining the human way of solving problems. Other times the Queen asked about Earth, what the people ate, how they lived, what they dreamed about. Daniel painted pictures of oceans stretching farther than sight, of forests alive with birdsong, of cities where people built not for war, but for art and music. She listened with a quiet curiosity, as though each word opened a door to a world she had never known. But whispers grew louder outside their private conversations. Some council members began to question why the Queen spent so much time with a human. "He is gaining too much influence," one warned. "If you continue this, your people will think you are weak," said another. The Queen ignored them, but Daniel could feel the tension rising. One night, while working with her in the workshop, he spoke carefully. "You know they don't like this. Us talking, us working together. They think it's dangerous." The Queen looked up from the armor piece she was holding, her golden eyes locked on his. "Let them think what they wish. They fear what they do not understand. But I will not dismiss wisdom because it comes from a human." Her words struck him deeply. She was not only defending him, she was choosing to see him as more than an outsider. And that bond, fragile at first, grew stronger with every shared moment. For Daniel, it was both a gift and a burden. He had never imagined being close to someone like her. Yet now he felt a connection that was undeniable. And he wondered quietly what the future would hold if that connection continued to grow. The test came sooner than either of them expected. A sudden crisis struck the city. A rogue faction, unhappy with the Queen's rule, launched a surprise attack during the night. Explosions shook the sky and soldiers rushed to defend the palace. The Queen donned her armor, the same armor Daniel had repaired, and prepared to lead her forces. Daniel watched from the balcony as she stood tall, her presence rallying her soldiers. The armor glowed brightly, its systems running flawlessly. It moved with her like a second skin, responding to her every command. Where once it had faltered, now it was perfect. Daniel felt a strange pride. Though he could not fight beside her, his work gave her the strength to protect her people. The battle raged for hours. Daniel remained in the palace, helping where he could, guiding frightened servants, repairing communication devices, and sending signals to the defenders. Though he was not on the battlefield, he felt every clash, every explosion, as though he were part of it. At dawn, the Queen returned. Her armor was scratched and scarred, but still glowing. She had led her soldiers to victory, driving the rebels away. The palace filled with cheers as she stepped into the grand hall. Daniel stood among the crowd, his heart pounding with relief that she had survived. When the cheering quieted, the Queen raised her hand. Her voice carried through the chamber, strong and steady. "Today we faced danger. Today we prevailed. And do you know why?" She paused, letting her eyes sweep over the crowd. "Because my armor held, because it worked as it should. And why did it work?" The crowd leaned in, waiting. She lifted her chin, her voice ringing with pride. "Only the human engineer fixed this armor." The words echoed louder than ever before. This time there were no laughs, no disbelief. The proof stood before them. The Queen alive, victorious, unshaken. Murmurs spread, not of doubt, but of realization. Slowly, heads turned again toward Daniel. But instead of suspicion, he saw something new in their eyes. Respect. Daniel's chest tightened as the Queen turned to look at him once more. Her gaze was steady, filled not only with acknowledgement but with something unspoken. Gratitude. Trust. Perhaps even hope. The silence that followed her words felt heavier than battle itself. Daniel understood in that moment what her look meant. It was not just recognition of his work, it was a promise. That from now on, he was part of something larger than himself. The hall erupted into cheers again, but Daniel hardly heard them. His focus remained on her, on the weight of her words, on the connection that had grown between them since the first moment he laid his hand on her broken armor. Later, when the hall had emptied and the celebrations faded, The queen approached, him privately. She stood close, her armor still humming softly. "You see now," she said, "your hands have changed more than a machine. You have changed the way my people see." Daniel swallowed, unsure what to say. "I only fixed what was broken." The queen's golden eyes softened, and for the first time a faint smile touched her lips. Sometimes that is the greatest gift. Not just in machines, but in people. Her words stayed with him long after. He had come to this world as a quiet engineer, unnoticed, overlooked. Now he was something else. Someone who had earned respect not by force but by patience, skill, and honesty. And though he did not know where the path would lead, he knew one thing clearly. From the day she said, those words, "Only the human engineer fixed this armor," his life had changed forever, and perhaps hers had too.